everybody. Thank you for joining the Intercompany Service Charging webinar offered by PIKON International Consulting Group. Today, myself, Koen Meuwis, and my colleague Jonas Merken will provide you with some insights into the intercompany service charging by using the tool resource-related intercompany billing. For this, we have prepared the following agenda. We will have now a short introduction on PIKON, or what it stands for, what we do, and then we will briefly explain to you a customer case, followed with then the details on the tool resource-related intercompany billing. And we will then also provide in our S4 environment a demonstration on how to, with a live example of how to invoice services across affiliates using this RICB tool. Let me start off with the introduction. PIKON stands for Process-Oriented Information Concepts. We are a company that has been working in the market since 1996, and we have offices located in Germany, UK, and in Belgium. We are around 80 IT consultants, and we offer mainly SAP-related services, which you can see in our SAP ERP business unit, as well as in business intelligence and custom development. But as part of our 3 points consultancy approach, where we really combine IT know-how, but also having and providing the business know-how and the people interaction, there we also have then the service of management consulting as one of our business units. This brief introduction is kept very brief because we want to give a very good overview on the tool of resource-related intercompany billing, for which I would like to explain to you first the customer case. And the customer case is basically the following, that we encounter at several of our customers which have affiliates in different or are active in different countries. So what we have, and this is depicted by this picture, where we have a company in the Netherlands, one in Belgium and the US, where we have different kind of services being provided between the affiliates, and those affiliates also need to be invoiced. Examples of these services could be like training, but also manufacturing services. It could also be administration services. For instance, if a shared service center is built up in Belgium and is providing administration services for all the other countries, then Belgium needs to invoice these countries. So our SAP demonstration as well today, that will be given by my colleague Jonas. Jonas will also provide such an example where the Dutch company is providing 2 kinds of different services to the Belgian entity, and this is on which we want to focus. So when we're talking about intercompany services in an international context, we have to be aware that we have different challenges. The first of all is, of course, how do we distribute the cost between the several internal companies. Secondly, is we have to take in consideration the complex service agreements that we might have between those affiliates. We need to take care about the pricing. Is there surcharging, a transfer price concept? We also have to have a look at a proper classification of services and their description, and also very important, the VAT handling. So it might well be that from some services between affiliates in one country, we have VAT being posted, and between different EU countries, there's no VAT being posted, but of course we need to report it correctly. What also, of course, happens in a lot of affiliates and international contexts is that we work with different currencies. So it might be that we send an invoice out of Euro to the US, or that we get an invoice out of the US in US dollars. Then there are different various legal frameworks which need to be taken in consideration. It might well be that kind of services are not allowed to be surcharged as such as a service. Sometimes the wording needs to be very specific, and the tax handling might be different. And then one of the most important challenges is the time factor, because when we talk about intercompany services, we also have the month-end closing that is very important, because at month end most companies have not enough time to deal with a very complicated service charging process. So services should be charged as soon as possible and should be posted as automated as possible, but taking into considerations the challenges that we had already mentioned beforehand. When we look at the different methods of intercompany service billing, we have several options. On this slide you see 6 possible options, which is not an all-inclusive list, but these are the options that were discussed previously with other customers of PIKON, of which we go from a very manual approach to a most automated approach. So if you take the first one, the full manual invoicing and posting, would basically mean that there is a manual posting on a intermediate account, and there's an invoice being created manually. This is being posted, and it also needs to be sent and posted manually on the other side. That also means that the invoice layout, the output, is manual, and we have a lot of likelihood of having different errors. In some of the SAP systems, you have the possibility to use cost allocation between cross-company using the reconciliation ledger. So this especially applies for companies that are not on UGL or S/4HANA yet. But again, here there's a cost allocation, but there's no automatic invoicing, there's no surcharging that can be allocated here, and it works with intermediate accounts. So you still have maybe a cost allocation that is automated, but the whole legal and invoicing part is still manual. Other options that were shown or investigated for customers are that there's a purchase order being created in the purchase to pay side, and there's a sales document being created, so a debit memo on the order to cash side, but still that's not an integrated flow, and you still have to do all of those documents in a very short time factor. Then we have also the possibility of contracts. Contracts are a very good tool to do intercompany charging. The main constraint here is that when we work with contracts, we're talking about cost allocations with a fixed billing plan. So we have steady payments or invoicing behavior for the duration of the contract, like say 10,000 euros a month between 2 legal entities. Then there's also a good possibility to use the customer service. Customer service is a module which allows basically also the customer service order to be used as a cost object that contains all the costs that you want to invoice to the intercompany affiliate. But of course then it also needs to be posted automatically at month end. Good, and then we have the tool, the resource-related intercompany billing, which from our point of view basically covers the advantages of both the cost allocation that you might have with a reconciliation ledger and the customer service module that allows you to basically have also an automated layout And this tool is quite powerful and can be used by companies that have a lot of intercompany transactions for services. And at this stage, I would like to give the word to my colleague Jonas so that he can give you an insight into the RICB and provide you as well with a live demo.
Thank you, Koen. I will now explain you the resource-related intercompany billing process, which we will call later on in this presentation RRICB. So RRICB is actually doing cost allocations during the month. You're making use of this cost allocations to allocate the services that occur from one entity to the other entity. So in your company, for example, the Dutch entity is delivering services to the Belgium entity, and every time such a service appears, the Dutch entity will allocate their costs to the Belgium entity. And we are thinking about administrative costs, accounting costs, marketing costs, all the different service costs that can appear will be allocated during the month. And it can happen maybe one time or several times, but in some companies it also can happen that you need to do a lot of allocations, maybe more than 1,000. So RRICB will take care of all these allocations, and you can do a lot of them. And in the end, when you did all these allocations, all the documents for both the involved companies, for the receiving and the delivering, will be created, and you will immediately have an overview about all the costs. So how does this RICB process now works? It all starts from a contract between the two legal entities. You made a contract from the delivering entity, for example, the Netherlands, to the Belgium entity, which is the receiving entity. So you make one contract in that direction. And then you can also make another contract in the other direction for the services from Belgium to the Netherlands. But good, we start from one contract in one direction. And from here on, we are going to use this contract for all the periods and for all the cost allocations that will appear later on. The cost allocations during the month happen in controlling. And while we are doing this cost allocations, we are making use of different CO objects. For example, when we're having an internal order, or we maybe need some services from the Netherlands as a Belgian company. So we are putting this services on the internal order and booking costs, allocating the costs with this internal order. Another example are WS elements when you're doing a project and you need some services, or you have some cost center assessment cycles when you have a lot of overhead costs and you divide the costs at the end of the month to the different entities in your company. So in this way you are dividing the allocations with CO objects. Resource-related intercompany billing is a standard functionality, but you can enhance it with several cost allocation validations. That means you can do a check for which services can be used for which contract and which company. So, for example, when the Netherlands are allowed to do training and consulting for Belgium, you can do, for example, marketing, because there is a control check that you are not able to do these allocations. In the end of RICB, all the official legal documents will be created, and also the internal needed and required documents. You also can make them create automatically if you could make all the settings in your system of your company. Another aspect of RICB is the flexible timing of the billing documents. You can do it in the end of the month, like usual, but you also can do them more times in a month or after 3 months. And in that way you can be really flexible and you can adjust it to your requirements. and to maybe make the month-end closing a bit easier. All we did before was for the delivering company code for the delivering entity. If you also want to create the documents of the invoice for the receiving company code, you can do processing with the iDocs messages. So when you're using this functionality, the needed documents for the receiving company are also booked and all the needed postings are done. Good. What are now the minimum requirements to implement such an error ICP process? First of all, you need one controlling area and one SAP system where all the companies and entities are working on. And this way you can implement error ICP. Another point is that you will have to make use of the real-time integration of the ledgers. All the postings need to be done immediately to FI. So everything is all right at that moment, but you can do the FE postings immediately to the second company because error ICP will take care of this. And the last point is the charging plus model of cost plus allocations. When you want to use error ICP, you have to make use of the cost plus allocations during the month. So that means that immediately after you deliver the service, you immediately have to do the cost allocations during the month at that moment. So if you fulfill this requirements, you can implement such an error ICP process, if it's possible. Then if we have an overview of the process, we see that we start with this one error ICP contract between the two entities. In our example, later in the demo and in our slides, we will make use of a contract between a Dutch company that is delivering services to the Belgium entity in the company. And we make up this contract one time, and then we can make use of it for all the different periods. So when we're then going to see during the month, or during the period you want to fulfill this services, I see for every time you do a service for the other entity, you have to do a cross allocation. So in the end, maybe there are done 100 or 200 cost allocations during the month for one contract. For example, 100 service hours, maybe 300 marketing hours. And then at the end, you are going to collect them at the end of the month or at the end of the period. When you're doing the dynamic processing, all the prices of the different services will be collected, and the total price will be calculated of all the services that were done between these two entities. Then the debit memo request will be created from the dynamic processing, and there you will see an overview of all the costs. You can add some lines, and you can check if everything is all right from all the costs that appeared. You can create several times during the month a debit memo request, maybe to make the month-end closing a bit more fluent, because you don't have to use the system then. But once you have created this debit memo request or more requests, you can collect them in one debit memo note, which is the invoice. So from now on, you have created all the documents that are needed for the internal and the legal requirements. This part, the cross cost allocations, the dynamic processing that creates a debit memo request, and the invoice, the debit note. This is the general part of the error ICP process, which is working with the contract. If you then also want to create the needed documents for the receiving company code, you can make use of the iDocs functionality, the iDocs messages. When you implement these ones, also the receiving company code will receive all its needed postings and will have all its reports. So in the end, all the documents will be created. When we have then a closer look to the accounting documents, we see here a slide with the cost allocations during the month. So every time service appears, for example, when the actual costs appear during the month, let's say for a training or an internal order or administrative cost, they are immediately booked at the Dutch company. We are allocating them with some cross-company activity allocation. In this case, with the internal order, we do a settlement of the costs, and in the end, the last one, we can do a cost center assessment to divide the cost between different entities. And we see this is what is happening during the month. All the costs will also be booked at the second company code to the receiving company code. And then an example of the slides, we are working with ECC 6.0 example from S/4HANA. We are not making use anymore of the reconciliation ledgers, but before S/4HANA, all the different systems were making use of reconciliation ledgers. So a second booking is needed, and we will see this on the right-hand side of this slide, where this second bookings are made. From S/4HANA on, this is not needed anymore, and later on in our demo, we are going to work in S/4HANA, so you won't see these bookings anymore there. When we are going now to the end of the month, we already see that we have this clearing account booked for the reconciliation ledgers. And once the invoice is booked, we see that we make some revenues. We are going to book some extra surcharges that we are charging for the services at our second entity. Because we are not doing it at a cost price, but we want to make a bit of profit, even if it's in our own company. We are implementing the tax amount. We're booking this, even if it's not always the case in Europe. If there are services that there is a tax rate on it, but there are a lot of cases where there is a tax rate for services, so that's why we implement this in the slide. So to show you that this is also a functionality. And from now on, from the invoice, all the documents have been created for the delivering company code. What doesn't have been done is the documents for the receiving company code. To do this, we can create this idocs message where I talk about. And when we create this idocs functionality, all the postings will be also done in the second company code, in the Belgian one. In the end, now we have all this needed bookings for the internal and legal requirements. I suggest that we now will have a look inside the demo. In the demo, we will make use of a situation where the Netherlands are performing service to the Belgium company code, and it's built on a contract that is agreed between the two of them. We're going to have a look at the contract in the transaction VA43. We already built a contract to use in this demo. And what you can see is that this is a contract between the Dutch entity and the Belgium customer, which is our Belgium entity, the receiving company code. From now on, we will make use of this contract to do all our cost allocations, and in the end, doing the invoice. Everything is built on this contract. So now we will do a cost allocation during the month when the Dutch entity is doing a service for the Belgium entity for an internal order. This can appear more times. This can appear 1,000 times during the month. And you also can do other cost allocations like I explained before. But for this example, we will only do one, and we will do this in the transaction KB21N, where we will do cost allocation with an order. We created several activities, which are the services. So we see that we created a consulting service and a training service. So we will do both of them. We did both of them today, like for a lot of hours. Training, and we will book it on an internal order that is going on. And let's say that we did 20 hours of the first activity, first service, and for example 25 of the second service. If we save this now, the bookings, the postings in CEO and controlling will already happen in both company codes, and the costs have been occurred there. So we can have a look at the accounting documents that have been created in FP03. We are looking to the Dutch company code in, let's say, in the bookings that happened today. And we see that this booking already happened. So we see both costs already appeared, the training, the consulting, and they are booked at the clearing account. If we now have a look at the Belgium company code, we also see that here already an accounting document has been created. So in both company codes, the cost has been booked, and we immediately have an overview of all the costs that appeared in both the company codes. So that makes it very easy to monitor this during the month. So once we did all these cost allocations during the month, we can collect them at several times during the month, but mainly you're going to do this once in the end of the month, only when you are making use of a lot of cost allocations. You can do it several times to don't use the system too hard in the end of the month. But now we are going to collect them with transaction TP93, where we are going to fill our contract that we are using for the period 10 October. And we will see now, when we are creating this, all the allocations are collected that happened during the month. You can see that some don't have a green square with them. These have already been built with a previous cost collection, a previous debit memo request. We will now only collect the open ones that the services that still have to be built, and these are the two we did today. So by saving this, we will now create a debit memo request. And we can see services collect the prices that have been agreed in the activities. And if we go into look to the conditions, you can see that we put 15% of charges on it. The extra profit we take from the second company code. And an output tax has been calculated, has been determined, and it's 0% because in the European Union, services between different countries have a tax amount of 0%, which is right. So we will save this debit memo request. And now we can collect all the debit memo requests that we created. You can collect a lot of cost allocations in one debit memo request, and normally we will only use one debit memo request for all the services that appeared between these two company codes in one direction. So we will now make from this debit memo request an invoice, a debit note, with transaction VF01. You already see the debit memo request. If you have made more debit memo requests during the month, you can collect them all at this place. But we only have one, so we make now an invoice of this. Okay, Now we will have a look at this in the transaction VF 03. The invoice has been created, and we can now see the accounting documents that have been created. We see that already an accounting document exists for the Dutch company code. All the revenues have been booked, the clearing accounts have been rebooked, and also the controlling documents have been created for the Dutch company code. What hasn't been created yet are the documents for the receiving company code. They can be created with iDocs functionality, and we can find it under the header, where we see with this functionality we can create also the documents for the receiving company code. And for some for some companies, maybe for a lot, it's also needed to make the print outputs for them, or a PDF file with the invoice in it. So you also can provide this at this place. When we have a look at the printout, we can see that it's easily created. It's like that, and you also can make it automatically that it's when you create an invoice, that this file is automatically printed or sent to a second entity. Good. This was everything for the demo. I will go now back to the slides. So what will this error ICB process now provide for your company, and what are the real benefits? Like I showed you a few times, all the documents will be created for your company code and for all your company codes in your company. They can be created automatically if all settings are done, and when it's possible to create the settings in your company with all your requirements that you need. But if it's implemented, error ICB will fulfill all legal and internal requirements that are needed, and the workload for the employees will also decrease a little bit, because they need to do less transactions, they can work more fluently, and they also have a better overview of the costs. Like I told you before, all the costs that appear during a month will be immediately booked when you do the cost allocations. And at this time, your company has a better overview about where the cost appeared and at which time and by who. So you immediately have a better overview of the costs. Also, when we are going to look at the profitability reporting, let's say you have now a better situation to have a view at this profitability. When you're working only with a contract, with another method, for example, you are agreeing on a 2,000 contract, and you are going to make use of this 2,000 euros for services, even if you haven't performed the services. Now with error ICB, you only calculate the hours that really happened, and you have a better overview of which where the cost appeared, and about which company code now really has a good profitability or not. So in this way you can do it in a more direct way and a more efficient way. In the end, error ICB will provide a more streamlined process, a more efficient process, and a more easy process to create all these documents. And certainly when we are going to work in the month-end closing, this will give a bit more space to work through the month-end closing. All the documents have been created already, and error ICB will help a more streamlined month-end closing. And if you are interested in even a more detailed processing of how month-end closing can be done really efficient, you can also have a look at our slide, where we have a webinar and a demo about the closing cockpit, the financial closing cockpit during the end of the month. So there you can find more information. What we as PIKON now can provide as an extra on the normal standard error ICP process is that next to the error ICP settings that can be done in the standard system, that we can provide extra CO objects to put the allocations on. In the standard system, some CO allocations are not permitted. For example, a cost center assessment cycle can be done in standard, but we can do some activation rules, and when they are done, this will be possible in the system. And so there are also some other examples, but we can extend the CO objects that you can use in the system. Next to that, we have two types of validation rules. The first one is for the services that can be done between two entities. For example, the Dutch company code can only do consulting and training to the Belgium company code. And when they want to perform marketing cost allocations, this control checks, this validity check will not allow this. So you can build validities between all the different entities. So no forbidden cost allocation can happen. Another block is the block that we can do a check between two entities, that there are no double contracts. So normally you only can have one contract in one direction between two company codes. And in standard SAP system and standard SAP settings for error ICP, you can create more contracts in that direction, and this can create some problems in the accounting. So with this check, we can make it efficient. Another big challenge in this process are the currency differences. When we are doing the cost allocations during the month, there will be some level of currency between two currencies, some exchange rate that have been agreed at that time. But in the end of the month, when we are collecting all this costs, there can be a change in the currency, it can be a change in the exchange rate, and with our reposting methods, we can clear this problem. And then finally, like I showed you a few times, for the receiving company code, we haven't created documents yet when we do a normal standard error ICP process. But with the IDOC settings, we can create an automatic posting of all the documents that are needed for the second entity, this receiving entity. And all this extra functionalities on the standard settings of error ICP that we can implement. That's called the SAP add-on of PIKON. And you also can find more specific details on our website. This was our webinar about resource-related intercompany billing. I hope you enjoyed it. And please feel free to contact us if you want more information to solve this in your company code. And I thank you for your attention.